Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Mindset Minutes. So last week I was talking to a client and she was asking, why is it that I'm getting triggered by everything? Now, first of all, the word everything is kind of one of those words you take note of because most of the time it's not everything. That's falling into the absolutisms. But clearly there was a bit of a pattern going on in her life at the moment that was making her feel more emotionally triggered by things that she wouldn't perhaps normally have noticed. But it brought in the conversation of triggers. What do you do with them? What are they? How do you get out of them, or how do you get past them? And first of all, we could be triggered by anything, both good and bad. But for today's purposes, we'll focus on the negative triggers. That's usually what people refer to with triggers. Some are more legitimate, and some are perhaps patterns from our past. If you get really upset because you lost somebody in your life, or you just lost your job, or you found out you have to relocate, or a relationship is breaking up, or something like that, that is very real and you're going to have an emotional reaction to it. The triggers typically are an abundance of negative emotion towards something that may or may not merit that much emotional reaction. And in this case, it wasn't. It was definitely a trigger from somebody in the past, and was not really giving her the feelings that she wanted to have, nor the control that she perhaps wanted to have. And so the first thing to look at when you have a trigger is honor your feelings. Obviously, something is up, and that's important. Our emotions are basically signs. They're not necessarily good or bad. They're telling you, hey, something is off here or something is right here. So that's how I look at emotions. I don't necessarily label them necessarily because I think they're incredibly valuable. They're basically signals that something is working or something isn't working. So when you're noticing you're feeling tension, tight, angry, sad, maybe frustrated, or particularly maybe jealous, or feeling, or self-conscious, any of those kinds of feelings, not necessarily the ones you want to hang around with that much. And so it's important to take a look at them and see what's going on underneath them. I want to take a slight detour right here, because one of the things that I have found in working with people for so many years, and in even myself, is that most of the time these triggers go back to a set of needs that we all have, but sometimes some of these sets of needs are perhaps overemphasized, and that overemphasis can make us more vulnerable to certain triggers, and they might not be bringing us the greatest fulfillment. So in these needs, we all, outside of the basic, Maslow's needs, of we need food and water and shelter and, our survival needs, there's another set of needs that we all need, all of them. Like, there isn't a good or a bad. It's just when one is perhaps highlighted more than others. And so one is security or safety. Another's variety. Another's love and connection. Another is significance. And then slightly higher level needs are growth and contribution. Those are sort of 6 sort of higher level needs, with growth and contribution even being the highest. And so the other 4 needs, if we live very, very heavily in any one of those boxes per se, it could lead to certain misalignments, I would say, lack of fulfillment. For me, when I really got into this, I realized I had a bit of a significant safety loop. That's going to get you nowhere fast, I can tell you that. It was back in my acting day. So of course, looking for significance, right? And then, my security, my safety was completely tied to whether or not somebody actually liked me or gave me, said that I was worthy of having significance. Terrible, terrible loop. So I had to fix that one pretty quickly once I became aware of what it was. Many people fall into the safety security trap, I will say. Again, we all need it. It's an important part of our life. This isn't dismissing it. It's just there's an overabundance of attention and perhaps need in that particular category. Significance is another one, putting a lot of your worth in what others think or comparisons to other people. That can show up in that area. Love and connection can often lead you, again, we need it, we want it, it's healthy, it's good, but too much emphasis on it can sometimes lead to very dysfunctional relationships, a lot of self-consciousness. Love and connection can also have to do with how you feel about yourself. So self-consciousness things, body issues maybe, or how you feel about yourself. Any of that category. And variety, not too many people fall into that trap, but maybe where you're just never satisfied, you always need something different. You can never really go deep, you always just need to go wide. And that can sometimes be a little bit tricky. But what I find is in these triggers, whatever it might be, maybe it's something you see on social media, maybe it's a look from somebody, maybe it's you not necessarily feeling as valued as you feel like you should be, or perhaps it's a tone of voice and anger, and that's just triggering to you if that's something you've experienced in your past. That might tie into safety. Maybe it's something body issue-wise that could tie into love and connection. Maybe you're feeling not so loving about yourself, and there's a little bit of a disconnect, misalignment in that category. And so that's maybe a framework for which you can take a look at what these triggers are and understand what's really driving it. Because typically, if you're having an abundance of reaction, there's a misalignment somewhere. The other thing that I found is that it's not only that perhaps you feel like you're missing. Often it's the sign of lack that's triggering these things. Lack of love, lack of belief in yourself, lack of significance, lack of safety, security, maybe lack of variety, any of those things that you're lacking, that's triggering whatever's coming at you. But there's one more additional piece to that. You might feel like you don't have it, but there's also the belief that you can't get it. And I think that's really, really important, because that is what can make us really get stuck and repeat these triggers and repeat being caught in some of these frameworks that are keeping us out of being ultimately fulfilled. So if you're noticing that you're being triggered by something, it's setting off a set of emotions, don't go into shame mode, don't go into blame mode. That's not going to help you. Don't suppress it. Honor it. This is amazing. You're getting told something that's worthwhile taking a look at. What is that? Where does it fit, perhaps, in one of those categories? What's underneath that? What might you feel like you're lacking, or what are you not believing is possible? And then how can you shift it? And that's where sometimes that growth and contribution can be really, really helpful. Because when we shift into how can I grow? What can I learn? How can I get curious about this? How can I expand my knowledge, my capacity in this particular area? How can I broaden my horizons on this? That is what's definitely going to lift you up and put you in a much more proactive stance and a better emotional state. Or perhaps it's, I need to get out of feeling sorry for myself, or feeling like everybody else has something and I don't, and maybe it's time to like contribute. Sometimes when we step into that place of contribution, there's nothing quite like helping others to help ourselves. And so those can be two higher level states that can also help in your actions to help settle perhaps those triggers and take a look. But really, often just the consciousness of it can wipe away a lot of the emotions to it, especially when you realize that perhaps you're coming from a place of lack or the belief that you can't ever get it. The world is limitless, and we can if we put ourselves out there to have that. So, on that note, I send you out into the world to notice what might trigger you and go through a little bit of that process and take a look at what needs might be being triggered. Where are you living perhaps more in that you could benefit from stepping out of that particular area, and how might you shift it into more proactive growth, contribution, or action that lifts you up as opposed to dragging you down. So with that, take that, go out and shine.